Let's talk about environment variables. This is one of the areas that a lot of people are confused about. So just like we have variables in our programming languages, in Linux, we have environment variables which we can set for storing configuration settings for our applications. So our applications can read configuration settings from these environment variables. In this lesson, I'm going to show you a few different commands for viewing all these environment variables and setting them. So the first command is printenv. With this, we can see all the environment variables in this machine. Take a look. So let me scroll up. All right. So here we have a bunch of key value pairs separated by an equal sign. The first variable is hostname, which is set to the ID of our container. And as you know, this is generated by Docker automatically. Then we have pwd, home, lscolors, and so on. Now down below, we have a very important environment variable called path. Have you noticed that sometimes when you run a program from the command line, you get an error saying the program or the command was not found, even though you have installed that program? Quite often that happens because your operating system, whether it's Linux or Windows, cannot find that program. Now, here's the interesting part. To find a program, your operating system is not going to go through your entire hard drive. It's only going to look at specific directories. And those directories are specified using the path variable. So this is set to a list of directories separated by colon. So here's the first directory. Then we have a colon. Here's the second directory, and so on. These are the directories that Linux or Windows searches for to find a program or a command. Okay? Now, what if you want to see the value of a particular variable? We can type printenv and then path. That's another way. Now, once again, everything is case sensitive here. So if I type path in lowercase, we're not going to see anything. Okay? Now, there's another way to see the value of an environment variable. Instead of printenv, we can use echo, but here we have to prefix the variable with a $sign. So Linux knows that we are referring to an environment variable, like path. Now, how can we set a variable? Using the export command. So let's define a variable called db_user, and I'm going to set that to mosh. Now this variable is stored in the current session, in the current terminal session. So we can read it using the echo command, db_user. We can also read it using printenv. However, this variable is only available in the current terminal session. So if I close this terminal session and open a new terminal session, this variable will not exist. Let me show you. So we can terminate this session by typing exit. Now we're outside of our container environment, so we're back on my Mac terminal. Now let's run docker ps to see all the Docker processes or containers. There's nothing here. Our container is stopped. Now to see all the containers, including stopped containers, we type docker ps-a, that is short for all. So let me expand this window so you can see clearly. So we have two stopped containers. One was running our Ubuntu image, and the other was running Hello Docker. This container was the one that we have been working with throughout the section. Now I want to start this container so we can work with it again. So just like virtual machines, we can stop or start a container, okay? So look at this container ID, 2F whatever. I'm going to grab the first few letters, 2F7. So to start this container, we type docker start. We use -i so we can interact with it, and then type the container ID. Quite often, we can type only the first 2-3 letters, unless there is another container whose ID starts with the same sequence of characters. Then we have to type more characters, okay? So let's start it again. We are back in the same Linux machine. Now if we type echo db_user, we don't see anything because that variable does not exist anymore. It was only available in that terminal session. Now, to make it persistent, we have to write it to a special file. So we go to our home directory. Now we list all the files, including hidden files. Earlier you saw this file, bash rc. This file is a user's personal startup file. So every time a user logs in, Linux loads this command from the user's home directory. So this is where we have to write permanent environment variables. Now we can edit this using nano, so nano.bashrc, but let me show you another technique. Earlier we talked about redirection. So using echo, I want to write something to this file. I want to set db_user to mosh, and then I want to redirect the result to bash rc. Don't execute this yet, because if you do this, you will overwrite the entire bash rc file. We don't want to overwrite it here. We want to append something to it. So we add another greater than sign, and this will append dbuser to bash rc. Okay. Now to verify our work, let's look at bash rc. So take a look. The last line contains our permanent environment variable. And of course, we can always come back and change this value. Now, one thing I want to emphasize here is that you should never store sensitive information in environment variables, because at the end of the day, these variables are stored in plain text files. So we don't want to store DB password here, because anyone who has access to this machine can read the DB password. So just be aware of this. I think most software engineers have made this mistake at least once in their career, and I'm no exception. So we have set DB user permanently in this file. Now, if we exit and open a new terminal session, we can still read the value of that variable. So let's look at all the stub containers. Here's our container. We're going to start it one more time. Docker start -i 2f7. We're back here. So let's echo DB user. Beautiful. Now, one last thing before we finish this lesson. The changes we make to bash rc file are only effective in the next terminal session. So if you write another environment variable here, that variable is not going to be available until we open another terminal session. Let me show you. So let's go to my home directory and echo, let's say, color equals blue. We're going to write that to .bash rc file. Now, if I echo color, look, that variable is not there, even though we wrote it to this file, because this file is loaded only once when we start a terminal session. So now we have two solutions. We can terminate the session and come back in, or we can use the source command to reload the bash rc file. So source.bash rc. And we have to execute this from our home directory. If we are not in our home directory, we can type source home directory /.bash rc. Good. Now let's echo color. And here's the result. Beautiful.